Tell us how you started. Why did you come to Shropshire?
My parents were farming in Shropshire because my father worked in cotton in Liverpool, and my mother was very keen to farm, and it was unseemly for ladies to go farming in the 1910s. So she went to College and learnt gardening. And eventually, after the First World War, married my father. And so she said to my father, I think I need to keep some cows, because her father had kept cows. So my parents then decided to buy a small farm near Whitchurch. And they found the farm at Hinton, which was quite small. It was only 60 acres, but very good land, a very small house without any sanitation. So then they decided that they would bring the stock over from Huxley to Hinton, and they walked. It was 12 miles from Huxley to Hinton. And my mother went to the top of the lane leading down to the main road of Hinton. My father was getting nearby and called the cows. I always find this rather moving, really. And she called the cows, and they all answered her. They must have been half a mile away, and she said, "Come on, cows, you're home. Cusha cows." And they all said, "Hooray! Moo!" And they came up the drive at Hinton, and they were the core, the beginning of the herd at Hinton, which eventually became very well known.
What is cudding?
Well, because they're ruminants, they have 4 stomachs. They eat a lot of grass, all in a hurry, put it in the first stomach, and then, when it's peaceful, like it is now, lie down and digest it. So they bring the cud up and chew and then swallow. They eat up to 50 kilograms of grass a day, and when it goes through the stomach, then obviously the second and third stomach and fourth stomach digest it, so that they get the goodness out of the grass. But the whole point is that because they're herd animals, and because of wolves, historically, they graze as a herd, and then when it's peaceful and they think it's safe, they'll go and lie down and cud. This is the history of cattle, because obviously they've done that for thousands and thousands of years.
Do the cows identify with the herdsman as an individual?
Absolutely, absolutely, completely. Cows are extraordinarily sociable creatures. Either they like to live in groups of about 40 or 50. They know each other really well. Of the group, there's always a group leader, and they make great friends with each other. But they also make great friends with you, because you meet the cow in the field, you go and say, "Oh, Dulcie, how nice to see you." And she says, "Oh, it's you. I'm glad to see you too." And she might be lying down cudding in the field. But if you really love your cows, which all cow keepers do if they do their job properly, worldwide, it doesn't really matter whether you come from the far end of the world or from England or Holland or across the world, if you really love cows, of course you get to know their personalities. And no 2 cows are the same. You might think a herd of cows are all the same. My goodness, they're not. They have very, very strong personalities.
How do they talk to you? What are the gestures and noises they make that you can understand?
I think it's possibly quite subtle and difficult to describe. You have a rapport like you do with a dog, because each one is different, and obviously you tend to like some better than others, which perhaps is unfair, but that's the same with people. But their characters are different. Some of them are much quieter, some of them are perhaps sharper, depending on the families. It runs in families like it does with people. And the extraordinary thing about cows is they know which family they belong to. And we had a mother and daughter who in the field were never parted. They're always together, although the daughter had been reared from birth separately from her mother. But when she had her first calf and was returned to the herd, she found her mother, and they were always together, grazing together. The normal practice is to wean the calf from the cow, because you need the milk. As long as the calf has had the first milk, because it's full of antibodies for the calf. But you can certainly distress a cow when you take the calf away from her, and she longs for the calf for 2 or 3 days. And it's easier for the cow really to do it quite quickly, rather than leaving the calf on the cow for a week when they're bonded, because they definitely bond. But if you take the calf away, the pain of the weaning is over much more quickly. And you can look after the calf properly and give it the right food and make sure it's got all the antibodies it needs. The other thing that a cow is really distressed, and you can tell, is if she's hungry or thirsty, she will moo. I hate hearing a cow mooing because I know there's something the matter. They shouldn't moo, unless they sometimes moo in welcome, but that's unusual. But on the whole, a mooing cow or a mooing group of cows mean they're short of care. Largely, if I hear that particular pitch of a moo, I know that the water system's broken down. It's different from a moo from being hungry. It's a different sound. If they're short of water, they tell you very quickly. They are distressed then, and they breathe faster. That's one of the indications of a cow that's distressed. If she's hungry or in pain, the breathing rate is much faster. She should breathe quite slowly, and evenly and deeply. And then the other thing that I always used to use for whether the cows were comfortable or happy was the angle of the ear, as how it fits onto the head, and normally the ear is sort of right angles, if you like. I like to see ears slightly cocked, slightly above the right angle from the cow's head. But if you see ears below the right angle, this is my theory, there's something not right. And the other fascinating thing about cows is that they're great creatures of habit. They always like to lie. Now they live in cubicles, but in the days when they were tied up in shippons, the Cheshire word for cowhouse, I mean, they always went into their own stall. And now, even in the cubicles, if a cow goes into a stall that the other cow thinks is hers, she will stand. Said, "You're sitting in my chair." And the cow said, "I can't help it." And she said, "You're sitting in my chair." And she'll stand over the cow until the cow feels so uncomfortable she's got to get up and move. "Hello, you're coming to talk to us?" "Hello, sweetheart, how nice to see you. Good morning." So they understand completely what you're saying to them. "Hello, how are you coming to talk? Just tell me they don't know your name." All my cattle were called Philpale or Cowslip or lovely names like that. Had family names. Sweetheart, you're coming to talk to us a bit more. In the summertime or later in the year, they have a rest period. Every cow needs a rest period. She milks for 9 months in the year, and then she needs to have time off. So she has 3 months off, and she has a calf every 9 months. So she has 3 months without a calf, and then she's hopefully in calf again after 3 months. And then at the end of her lactation, she has 3 months rest, and then calves again. So with a really well managed herd, your cow calves every year at 365 days. In fact, you talk about a calving index as to whether it's above 365 days or lower. If you can get your whole herd calving within 370, 80 days, 90 days at the outside, that's really good cow management. It's an indication that the herd is well managed.
And are the cows we know now the same cows as there were 10,000 years ago? Have big differences been bred into them?
There are differences bred into them, yes, definitely, because the difference between beef cattle, if you like, and dairy cattle, because they've been asked to do different tasks, and therefore dairy cattle have been bred to produce more milk or better quality milk, while beef cattle have been bred to produce meat. Because dairy cows are handled continually from the moment they're born until they come into milk at 2.5 years old or 3 years old, and then they're handled every day, and therefore they're used to people, which beef cattle are not. I mean, you turn beef cattle away to fatten on the grass. These cattle actually are British Friesian as opposed to Holstein. They were imported into the United Kingdom sort of before the war. They started using British Friesians because they're an improvement apparently on the dairy shorthorn, which was the original British breed of dairy cattle. And then they brought Friesians in from Friesland in Holland to improve the milk output. So I think people really tend to use Friesians or Holstein now because they're better converters. The point really is to convert grass into milk.
Do you like grass?
Love grass, because grass is the source of milk, cream, butter, cheese, meat, hide, horn, glue, all coming from grass.
Are all grasses the same?
No, absolutely not at all. Grass is completely different. There are 5 or 6 species of grass that we use for feeding dairy cows because the photosynthesis of those particular species is highly efficient, producing high sugar. And the higher quality of sugar, the better the fermentation is and the better quality of milk.
How do you feel now surrounded by cows?
I get quite emotional about them actually because I just think they're the most wonderful animal. And when you think what a cow does for us, I can't even think that they're the most generous animal that God ever made. And they are so charming. Do you see how delightful they are?
Is there anything you'd like to say to people about cows?
I think they need to be appreciated. And perhaps take a little more notice in where their dairy products come from, because it all comes from these generous cattle. And the thing that upsets me more than anything else is that we pay more for water and less for milk. Water is freely available when you think of the amount of work that goes into producing milk, and it isn't being appreciated financially. And when we were farming at Hinton, there were 5 herds of this size on the same sort of thing. You go out in the morning and hear all the cows being called up. Come up, you say, come on, working, come on. That sort of call. You say, they all, come on cows, come on cows. And you could hear everybody around calling their cows. It's all gone.
Is that because it's not viable?
Exactly. And therefore the herds are getting bigger and bigger. I mean, there's a herd not very far away from here milking 1,000 cows, because it's the only way to make it pay. You are looking at something which in some years won't be here. You'll never see this again, what we're looking at this morning.